Question number 2, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Will he rule out making cuts to working for families payments this year? If not, why not?
The Honourable Bill English, on behalf of the Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Prime Minister, yes, if there were to be any changes to working for families, they would take effect after the election, probably from 1 April next year.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. Did he say, and I quote, "There will be no changes at all to working for families under an incoming national government, and the reason for that is that we want to ensure that there is certainty and there's not greater complexity in the system," and does he intend to break that promise?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the government has kept its word. We have maintained working for families and therefore security for families' weekly incomes, despite the fact that since the Prime Minister made that statement, we've had a global financial crisis, we've had finance company meltdowns in New Zealand, we've had 2 major earthquakes, as well as flat economic growth, and I think that is a major achievement of this national government.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Point of order.
The question was very clear. Does he intend to break that promise? I didn't hear the answer to that question.
Order. I heard the answer very clearly. He said no, they hadn't broken the promise.
Speaking to the point of order.
Well, order. I don't need any further time wasted on it. In the previous answer, the Minister made it very... If the Honourable Pete Hodson wants to remain in the House, I'm not in a mood to be trifled with this afternoon. He won't interject while I'm on my feet. The previous answer said there'd be no change till after the next election. So the member should listen. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, point of order.
Point of order.
I did listen, and I resent the reflection on the fact that I didn't.
I apologise to the member. Please just ask a supplementary question.
Mr Speaker, did the Prime Minister also say, and I quote, "I've said earlier there will be no changes. People will not be worse off under working for families, and will National continue to honour that promise?"
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, as I explained to the member, National has honoured that promise. If there are any changes, as I explained to him, they would come into effect after the election. And it seems to me that keeping that promise, despite the fact of a global financial crisis, finance company meltdowns, 2 major earthquakes, is a remarkable achievement.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, when those promises were made, were those promises qualified, "We will honour them for 3 years," or were those promises unequivocal?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the promise was made and has been kept. And if there was going to be any changes, we would do what any respectable government would do, and that is go to the electorate with those changes, and if they're endorsed, we would implement them, and if they weren't, we wouldn't.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, did the Prime Minister's colleague, the Minister of Finance, say, and I quote, "Whether it's national super or student loans or working for families, we've said we'd leave that stuff alone, and we have, despite the fact that we're running a large deficit, and does that assurance still stand?"
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I'd give the same answer as the questions about the Prime Minister's statements. That is what has happened, despite the fact we've had a global financial crisis, a couple of large earthquakes and the finance company meltdown, as well as dealing with the leaky homes problems. These things have incurred billions of dollars of extra costs for government. We have stuck to what we promised, and any changes in any of it would be put in front of the electorate at the election.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. When the Prime Minister has talked about cutting working for families for those whose joint household incomes are over 100,000, is it correct that cutting working for families for those whose joint incomes are at that level would return $1.7 million only, as the Parliamentary Library sets out?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I haven't seen the Parliamentary Library calculation, so I can't comment on that.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. I seek leave of the House to table the workings of the Parliamentary Library, which point out that the savings for joint incomes over 100,000 would be 1.7 million.
Leave is sought to table that document. Is there any objection? There is no objection.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. If the savings on cutting back working for families payments to those whose joint incomes are at that level are so insignificant, can he give an assurance to this House that any cuts to working for families would actually dig down to people whose joint incomes reflected each income probably being less than the average wage?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the member will have to wait and see just what the decisions the government does make in that area, but he ought to keep these things in proportion. Those same families are currently paying about 6% on their mortgage, whereas under his government they were paying 10% on their mortgage, and I think they're grateful for that.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. What integrity do the promises of the national government have when firstly they've already broken the promise when they said we would not increase GST, and now he's telling the House that the National Party is going to break their promises on working for families and probably KiwiSaver as well? Where's the integrity?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm not sure it's the day for the Leader of the Opposition to make claims about integrity around public statements.
Order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order. The point of order has been... The member should note his own leaders called a point of order. The Honourable
Mr Speaker, I think if you reflect on that answer, it went nowhere near addressing the question.
Well, order. Order. There won't be any comment while I've got to my feet to make sure there is no comment on a point of order. The member should just reflect on the question he asked. He basically accused the question to the Prime Minister of lacking integrity. Surprise, surprise, he got an answer that questioned the member's own integrity. Don't ask the Speaker to intervene under those circumstances. Just reflect on the question asked. Question number 3, Tim McIndoe.